Every family has secrets, but what happens when those secrets are exposed in the most public way possible? At a school parents' evening, the Gray family's quiet, perfect life is shattered. Laura and Richard have built a life of stability, but their daughter's best friend, Sarah, holds a dangerous secret that could tear everything apart. As tension grows and the pieces of an affair begin to surface, the Gray family is thrust into a whirlwind of lies, betrayal, and heartbreak. How far will Richard go to protect his reputation? And what will Laura do when she learns the truth? This evening will change everything, and not for the better. Before we continue, friends, I kindly ask you to subscribe to my channel. It only takes a second for you, but for me, it's an extra motivation to keep creating videos. I'd also really appreciate a comment. Thank you for your support, and now let's continue with the story. The evening air carried a subtle chill, the kind that made Richard Gray tug his jacket tighter around his shoulders as he walked down the quiet suburban street. His house, nestled between two towering oak trees, gleamed in the fading light. Neatly manicured lawn, soft glow spilling from the windows, all perfectly in place. But the stillness of the world outside only made the chaos inside his mind feel louder, more urgent. Something was wrong. Something he couldn't shake, no matter how many times he tried to distract himself with work, with routine. He tried to tell himself it was just the pressure of his busy job, the long hours, the travel. But as he stepped through the front door, it felt like the walls were closing in around him. Inside, Laura moved through the house with practiced ease, setting the table, checking her phone, offering him a soft smile as she met his gaze. Her beauty had always been understated, the kind that crept up on you slowly, smooth skin, the delicate curve of her neck, the quiet grace with which she moved. She was the picture of the perfect wife, the perfect mother. But recently, something had shifted in her. Her eyes, once full of warmth, now seemed to carry a weight, and he knew deep down that she had begun to notice the distance between them. Kate, their daughter, sat at the table, her phone glued to her hand as she scrolled aimlessly. She barely glanced up when Richard entered, the silence between them thickening with every passing day. "Have you heard from Sarah?" Laura's voice cut through the tension, soft but pointed. Richard froze, his heart skipping a beat. He had known this moment would come, yet hearing Sarah's name from Laura's lips felt like a betrayal. Kate didn't even look up. "Yeah," she texted. "She's coming over later." There it was. Sarah, the young woman who had become a regular presence in their home, in their lives. Richard had tried to ignore it at first, the way Sarah always found reasons to linger when he was around. She was just a teenager, just Kate's best friend, after all. But there was something about her that tugged at him, something that made him look twice when she passed by, something in the way her laugh lingered in the air long after she'd left. She had that kind of magnetism, the kind that made people look at her longer than they should. She wasn't just pretty, she was captivating. She was tall, slender, with striking features that bordered on ethereal long, sun-kissed hair that cascaded in soft waves around her shoulders, and eyes the color of storm clouds, dark and deep, full of secrets. Richard couldn't remember when it had happened, when she had gone from a harmless, awkward teen to a woman who made his pulse race with just a glance. But now, every time she entered the room, he felt a sudden, inexplicable rush of desire. It disgusted him. The guilt of it gnawed at him, clawing at his insides. He was a married man, for Christ's sake. But even so, Sarah's allure was undeniable, and Richard hated himself for feeling this way. She had a way of looking at him as if she knew him, as if she saw the cracks in his armor and was waiting for him to crumble. And every time their eyes met, he felt like he was on the edge of something dangerous. Laura's voice snapped him out of his spiraling thoughts. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone laced with something he couldn't quite place. Was it concern, or was it suspicion? Either way, it hit him like a punch in the gut. "Yeah," he muttered, his mind racing. "Just tired." But Laura wasn't fooled. She could tell something was wrong. She always could. The unease in her eyes had become more noticeable over the past few weeks, and Richard knew it wasn't just his work that was pulling him away from her. It was the slow, steady erosion of their connection. The long hours, the missed conversations, the silences that stretched between them like a vast, unbridgeable chasm. He knew she had begun to question him, begun to notice the changes in him. The way he started coming home late, the way his attention seemed to wander when she was speaking to him. But it wasn't just that. It was the way Sarah's presence had shifted something between them. The way she always seemed to be around when Richard was home. How Laura's eyes would narrow when Sarah laughed a little too loudly, or when Richard found himself lingering just a little too long in the same room as her. Richard had seen the questions in her eyes, the way she would suddenly fall silent when Sarah was in the house. Laura had always been observant, too perceptive for her own good. Richard's heart pounded as he made his way outside, desperate for space to breathe. The house felt suffocating, its walls pressing in on him, reminding him of his own weakness. His mind raced as he walked the quiet street, the thoughts swirling in his head, each one more dangerous than the last. Was he really that far gone? Was he really considering this? The guilt clawed at him. This wasn't just some innocent flirtation. It was more than that. He wanted her, and that was something he couldn't forgive himself for. His phone buzzed in his pocket, jolting him out of his thoughts. He fumbled for it, his fingers shaking as he saw the name on the screen. Sarah. His heart skipped a beat. His thumb hovered over the screen, a moment of hesitation before he opened the message. Hey, Richard. I know you're probably busy, but I was wondering if we could talk later? There's something I need to ask you. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. His pulse quickened, his breath catching in his throat. His mind raced. What did she want? He felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Guilt, fear, and something darker, something that whispered, go ahead. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but it was too late. He had already typed his response. Of course. I'll be home soon. What the hell was he doing? The moment he hit send, a wave of panic flooded over him. He wanted to pull it back, to erase it, but it was too late. He had made the choice, and now there was no turning back. As he stood there, the weight of his decision pressing down on him, his mind wandered back to the house, to Laura, to the life he had built. Was he really willing to throw all of it away for something as fleeting and dangerous as this? His stomach twisted at the thought, but the pull, the temptation was too strong. And deep down, he knew he had already crossed a line he couldn't uncross. When he finally returned home, the house was quiet, but the tension was palpable. Laura was still at the table, staring at her phone, her fingers tapping nervously on the edge of the screen. Richard knew she felt it too, felt the unspoken words between them, but he couldn't bring himself to say anything. Not yet. Not until he saw where this all led. The cold night air nipped at Richard's neck as he sat in his car, staring blankly at the dimly lit house ahead. The headlights cast a faint glow on the lawn, illuminating the perfect symmetry of the place, the soft contours of the garden hedges, and the warm light spilling from the windows. It looked serene, untouched, like nothing had ever disturbed its peaceful exterior. Yet inside, everything felt fragile, ready to crack. Richard tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, his gaze fixed on the window as he waited. He had made his decision, and it had been the kind of decision that had come with no warning. Just an overwhelming, undeniable pull. The guilt was sharp, digging into him, but the desire was sharper. Sarah's message still lingered in his mind, the soft, innocent phrasing of it. Yet the weight of her request hung heavy. He had promised her, "I'll be home soon." The lie had slipped out so easily, like it was nothing. He should have told Laura the truth, but telling her meant facing something far worse than the quiet tension he could barely live with now. Telling her meant the end. His thumb traced the steering wheel, moving over the leather in small, repetitive motions. His eyes darted to the house again. Laura would be waiting, or she'd already gone to bed. Either way, she'd never know. He glanced at his phone, reading Sarah's message one more time before hitting the gas. Inside, Laura sat at the kitchen table, her hands cold as she gripped the edge of her coffee mug, the ceramic warm against her palms. She had checked the time again. Almost an hour had passed since Richard had left, and the silence in the house seemed to stretch with each second. She had thought, once upon a time, that silence could be comforting. But now it felt like an accusation. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping across the floor with a sharp sound. She moved to the hallway, eyes scanning the table for any clue, any hint of what Richard was doing. His coat had been thrown on the chair earlier, just like always, but the way it hung there now, untouched, not even settled, made her uneasy. She felt like an intruder in her own life. Her fingers brushed the fabric of his coat, pulling it open just slightly. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. Maybe the smell of his cologne, maybe the faint trace of a conversation that didn't belong, but she kept searching. The weight of uncertainty hung over her, thick like smoke in a room. The quiet was oppressive. And then, she found it. A scrap of paper, an envelope she hadn't noticed before. She picked it up carefully, heart thumping in her chest as she unfolded the paper. It was a message, not from work, not even a note about something mundane. It was from Sarah. "Can we meet? Please, Richard. I need to talk. It's important." Laura read the words again, the message so innocent in its tone but so loaded with meaning. A wave of nausea hit her, but she didn't put the note down. Instead, she clenched it tightly, feeling the paper crinkle beneath her fingers. She wasn't imagining things. The unease, the sudden discomfort had been right all along. Richard wasn't just avoiding her. He was hiding something. She wasn't going to let this slip away. Not this time. Laura stormed to the living room, dialing Richard's number on her phone without thinking. Her thumb hovered over the send button for a moment before she pressed it, her breath shallow as the phone rang. There was no answer. "Damn it!" she muttered under her breath. She was done waiting. Richard's car crept down the winding road that led to the old cabin by the woods. It was a place they'd come to often, back in the early days of their marriage, a quiet retreat far from the noise of the world. He remembered the first time they had come here, laughing, talking about their future. The air had been warm, filled with the smell of pine and earth. He had promised her, that night, that they would never let anything tear them apart. But now, the place felt like a ghost, the memories of their love now tainted by the weight of his betrayal. The trees that had once seemed so protective now loomed like silent sentinels, casting long, shadowy fingers across the road. He slowed as he approached the familiar clearing, where the cabin sat nestled against the trees. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as the car bumped over the dirt road. He couldn't deny that Sarah had drawn him here, but the thought of seeing her made him feel like an outsider in his own life. He pulled the car to a stop and sat there for a moment, his eyes fixed on the cabin in the distance. It was strange. This place had once been a refuge. Now it was a reminder of everything he had lost, everything he was about to lose. He had told himself he wouldn't come back, but he had. And the moment he stepped out of the car, he knew there was no going back. Back at the house, Laura paced the living room, her mind racing. She was tired of waiting, tired of the excuses, tired of the silence. Richard hadn't come back yet. She knew he was lying. She knew he was with Sarah. She could feel it, deep in her bones. The flash of their early years together played in her mind, fragments of memories that stung like a fresh wound. The two of them, so carefree and in love, laughing together on road trips, holding hands as they walked through the park. Their wedding day, her heart swelling as she watched him standing there. So proud, so certain. She had trusted him then, fully, completely. But that trust had been chipped away over time, piece by piece, until it had become a crumbling foundation beneath her feet. She stopped pacing and stood in front of the door, her hand on the handle. She could feel the weight of what she had to do. There were no more lies, no more waiting. She had to face him. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat, the fabric soft against her skin, and stepped out the door. The cool air hit her face like a slap, and she pulled the collar tighter around her neck. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she couldn't stay inside. Not anymore. Every step felt like a choice, like a declaration that she wouldn't allow this to happen again. As she walked down the driveway, her eyes drifted toward the road ahead. The trees on either side of her were silent, their branches barely moving in the breeze. The serenity of the night contrasted with the pounding in her chest, the tightness in her throat. The world around her was so still, so quiet, and yet everything inside her was unraveling. She didn't know where she was headed, but the path seemed clear. The message was obvious. She would confront him, and she would make him admit the truth. No more games. When Richard reached the cabin, he saw Sarah standing by the door, her figure illuminated by the faint glow of the porch light. She was wearing a tight, black jacket, the collar turned up against the cold. Her smile was slow, seductive, as she stepped toward him. "Hi, Richard," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm glad you came." He could feel the heat of her presence even before she was close, her body almost radiating it. Every step she took toward him seemed to draw him in, and he hated himself for it. "I didn't know what you wanted," Richard muttered, his hands trembling as he ran them through his hair. The sound of her voice was like a drug, pulling him in, even though every fiber of his being screamed at him to walk away. "I just want to talk," Sarah said, reaching out to touch his arm, her fingers brushing his sleeve lightly. The touch was electric, and Richard fought to keep his composure. But it was too late. As Sarah stepped closer, her breath warm on his skin, everything else faded away. The world, the past, the family, all disappeared in that single electric moment. And as he leaned in to kiss her, he could almost hear Laura's voice in the back of his mind, a distant whisper from the past. The woman he had promised never to hurt. But now it was too late. The air in the cabin felt suffocating, pressing down on Richard's chest as he watched Sarah turn her back to him. The room had grown colder, even though the fire still burned quietly in the hearth. He could hear the crackling of the wood, but it felt like a distant sound, almost irrelevant compared to the gnawing weight in his stomach. Sarah had been all warmth, all charm, just a few moments ago, her smile, her soft touch, the way she had leaned in. But now she was colder, distant. The energy between them shifted with a single, subtle movement, her posture stiffening, her lips tightening into a thin line. It was as if she had made a choice for him, and he hadn't even realized it. He hesitated before speaking. "Sarah, what's going on?" His voice cracked slightly as the words came out, his body tensing with the familiar mix of confusion and shame. This wasn't how he had imagined it. There was no passion, no fiery betrayal. Just a quiet, painful realization that he was standing on the edge of everything he had taken for granted. She didn't answer at first. Instead, she stared out the window, the fog outside thickening, turning the world into a blur of shadows. When she finally spoke, her voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, her words laced with bitterness. "You've been pretending, Richard. Pretending like you're not already making choices. Pretending like you're torn. But you're not. You're just scared." Richard's heart raced as she spoke. He felt his throat close up, his breath shallow. "I never meant for this." "Don't lie to me," Sarah interrupted, her eyes finally meeting his. But they weren't the eyes of the girl he had known. They were hard, calculating. "You've been lying to yourself long enough. You're not ready to walk away from her. And maybe you never will be." Her gaze dropped to the floor, and her voice softened, the sarcasm gone, replaced by something more cynical. "I'm just the distraction, Richard. Nothing more." Richard took a step forward, his chest tightening with a sharp stab of guilt. He had never wanted this moment, this confrontation. He had never thought Sarah would be the one to put an end to the charade. But now that it was here, it felt like a weight lifting, even as the room seemed to shrink around him. "I didn't mean for you to feel that way," he muttered, barely able to look her in the eye. I'm sorry." The words felt hollow as they left his mouth, as if they couldn't undo what had already been done. Sarah didn't look up. She simply nodded, her lips tight. "Yeah, well, that's the problem, Richard. You never meant for any of it to happen. But it did." Richard stood there, frozen, unable to form any coherent response. He watched Sarah turn away, walking to the window, her back to him. There was nothing more to say. He had come to a crossroads, and Sarah had already chosen for him. As Richard arrived back at the house, the weight of his actions seemed to press down on him with each step. The driveway was dark, the house a silhouette in the distance, its lights warm against the cold, unforgiving night. His thoughts spiraled. He had wanted to end it, wanted to stop the lies, the constant feeling of being pulled in two directions. But now all he could think about was the last few hours. The way Sarah had dismissed him, the way Laura would react when she found out. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white. He knew he was walking into a storm, but the fear didn't stop him. It had never been more real. He parked the car, the engine shutting off with a dull click, and sat there for a moment, staring at the door. There was no easy way to do this. There was no right time, no perfect words. All he had was the broken remains of his own choices. Inside, the silence felt like a physical force. Richard could feel it the moment he stepped through the door. The air thick with unspoken words, with tension that had been building for days, maybe weeks. Laura stood in the hallway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face unreadable. "Where were you?" Her voice was low, but there was a sharpness to it that made Richard's throat tighten. She was no longer waiting for an excuse, no longer giving him the space he had been afforded before. This time it was different. Richard opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. His throat felt dry, the pit in his stomach deepening with each second. "I know where you were," Laura said, her gaze never leaving his. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Her eyes were hard, determined. "I know exactly who you were with." Richard couldn't meet her gaze. His eyes drifted to the floor, his hands nervously gripping the edge of his jacket. His breath came out in shallow bursts. "Laura, I don't know what to say. I didn't mean to hurt you." "You've been lying to me, Richard." Laura's voice cracked, but she held herself together, her shoulders rigid with barely contained emotion. "You've been lying for weeks, pretending everything was fine, but it wasn't." Richard swallowed hard, stepping back slightly as though the words physically pushed him away. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "You think I don't know that?" Laura's voice rose, the hurt creeping into every word. "Do you think I didn't notice? Do you think I couldn't feel it?" Her eyes flashed with pain as she took a step toward him, her face twisting in anguish. "You don't think I noticed the way you looked at her? The way you started pulling away from me?" Her voice wavered, and Richard's heart tightened at the rawness in her tone. "I trusted you, Richard. I gave you everything, and you just threw it all away. For her." Richard's chest tightened, the guilt crawling up his throat, choking him. He took a shaky breath, but his mouth felt dry. "I didn't want this. I don't want to lose you." "Then why did you let it happen?" Laura spat, her voice trembling with rage now. "You could have stopped it. You could have told me. You could have chosen me, but you didn't. You didn't even try." The words cut deep, sharper than any physical blow. He had tried to hold on to her, tried to protect their life, but his actions had already betrayed her. He couldn't deny it now. She looked at him, her eyes filled with something he couldn't bear to look at. Disappointment, but beneath it, something colder, something harder. "I gave you everything, Richard," she whispered, her voice breaking, her hand trembling as she reached for her coat. "Everything." The finality of her words hit him like a wave, drowning out everything else. He stood there, rooted to the spot, as she turned her back to him, walking toward the door. "Laura, please." His voice cracked, and his feet finally moved, stepping toward her, but it was too late. She was already at the door, her hand on the knob. "I can't do this anymore," Laura said, her back to him, her voice barely audible. She opened the door and stepped outside. Richard stood frozen in the doorway, watching her retreat into the night. His eyes burned, but no tears came. There was nothing he could say to stop her. He felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. This was it. There was no turning back. The door clicked shut behind her with a sound so final it seemed to echo through the empty house. And as the sound of her footsteps faded into the distance, Richard realized the truth of her words. She was gone, and it was his fault. The knock came like a gunshot in the silence. Sharp, sudden, unwelcome. Richard jerked upright from the armchair, nearly knocking over the half-empty glass of whiskey on the table beside him. He hadn't expected anyone. Not now, not with Laura gone, not with the house suffocating in its own stillness. The knock came again, firmer, more deliberate. He crossed the room with caution, a sick feeling crawling up his spine. The front porch light cast a pale yellow halo through the frosted glass. A silhouette waited on the other side. Broad shoulders, upright posture, collar black. Richard's breath caught in his throat. Father Mark. He opened the door slowly, barely an inch, as though doing so too quickly might let in something he wouldn't be able to force back out. Richard. Father Mark's voice was cool, measured. His face was calm, too calm. But there was something behind his eyes, something hard. May I come in? Richard didn't move. The priest stepped forward without waiting for a response, the worn soles of his shoes clicking against the hardwood floor as he crossed the threshold like he owned the place. What the hell are you doing here? Richard's voice was rough, strained. His mouth was dry, his throat tight. A headache pulsed behind his temples. Now's not the time. Father Mark looked around the living room with slow, assessing eyes. The place was a mess. Laura's mug still on the table, one of Kate's sweaters draped across the couch, the silence hanging like fog. It is, he said, finally turning back to Richard. It's exactly the time. Richard's fists clenched instinctively. His shoulders stiffened. You think I need a lecture? You think I need you? I'm not here to judge you, the priest replied softly. At least, not in the way you think. That voice, it was too calm, too certain. It sent a chill crawling down Richard's arms. Then why are you here? Father Mark took a seat without being asked, resting his hands lightly on his knees. His composure made Richard feel exposed, like a child about to be scolded. The priest looked up, his gaze piercing. Laura came to see me. Richard's stomach flipped. She was distraught, Father Mark continued. Not just angry, not just hurt, devastated. I've never seen her like that. A pause. She told me about Sarah. Richard looked away. His jaw tightened, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Laura had gone to him? Of course she had. He was the one who always knew how to make people talk. To listen with that practiced stillness, the kind that made you want to confess just to fill the silence. She said you betrayed her trust. And your daughters. Father Mark leaned back. She didn't ask for advice. She asked for help. She didn't have to drag you into this, Richard muttered. She didn't, Father Mark said. She's not dragging anyone. You did that yourself. Richard paced, trying to calm the fire building in his gut. The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls pushing in. Why now? He snapped. Why show up tonight? To rub salt in the wound. Father Mark's eyes flickered. Because Laura isn't the only one who's been watching you spiral. And I think you're on the edge of doing something worse than what you've already done. Richard stopped moving. He stared at him. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. No, I don't, Richard shot back. But the words sounded hollow even to him. Because he did know. The late-night drives with no destination. The whiskey at breakfast. The mounting pressure at work. The mounting pressure everywhere. The emptiness when he looked in the mirror. The days spent avoiding his daughter's eyes. The nights spent not sleeping at all. You've got a pattern, Father Mark said. I saw it once before. You were on the verge years ago. Remember? Richard stiffened. A memory surfaced. Unbidden, unwanted. It was nearly 8 years ago. Laura had miscarried. Richard had taken it hard, but he had buried it in work. In avoidance. In silence. He'd started drinking too much, pulling away from Laura, shutting her out. He remembered sitting in this very living room with Father Mark late one night. He'd come over at Laura's insistence, and Richard had told him things he hadn't told anyone. About how tired he was of being someone he didn't recognize. About how, for one terrible moment, he thought of just driving into a tree on the interstate. And now here he was, Full circle. You think I'm going to kill myself? Richard said, his voice low, dangerous. Is that what this is? Father Mark didn't flinch. I think you're capable of self-destruction. I think you've been proving it for months. I think something in you wants to burn everything down just to see if there's anything left. Richard's face twisted, his chest aching with the weight of it. You don't know me. I do know you, Father Mark said sharply. Because I was you. Richard blinked. I ruined a family once, the priest said. Before the collar. Before the forgiveness. I had a wife, a child. I lost them both because I couldn't face myself. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. I came here because Laura still cares about you. Because I do too, despite everything. And because if you don't face what you've done, if you keep burying it, you'll destroy more than just your marriage. You'll destroy yourself. Richard slumped against the wall, suddenly aware of how tired he was. Bone tired, soul tired. Everything inside him was hollow. There were no more lies left to tell. Not to himself. Not to anyone. I can't fix it, he whispered. Maybe not, Father Mark said. But you can stop it from getting worse. Richard looked at him. There was no judgment in his eyes now. Just experience. Just a quiet, haunted understanding. I'm not going to offer you a prayer or a sermon, the priest said. But I will tell you this. If you want to earn even a sliver of your daughter's respect back, you'd better start now. Before she finds out from someone else. Richard's stomach lurched. Kate, he hadn't even thought of how far the ripple would go. Of how much more there was to lose. He had only just begun to grasp what he had done to Laura. Does Kate know? Father Mark's silence was answer enough. Richard lowered his head into his hands, shame burning up his neck like fever. His heart hammered in his ears. Father Mark stood, walking toward the door. This is the part where you decide who you are, Richard. The man you were, or the man you're about to become. The door opened. I'll check in tomorrow, he said. And then he was gone, swallowed into the dark. The door clicked shut behind him, and the house was quiet again. Too quiet. Richard stood in the stillness, his breathing ragged, the floor beneath his feet suddenly feeling unsteady. The last fragments of his world were slipping fast, and now, for the first time, he saw the gaping void he was falling into. The worst part wasn't the guilt. It was the terrifying thought that he might deserve it. The moment Richard saw Kate standing in the doorway, a strange, almost instinctive guilt swept over him. It was like being caught doing something shameful, except the thing he was caught for was everything. His hands twitched at his sides. His tongue felt thick and useless in his mouth. His daughter, the same girl who used to fall asleep with her head on his chest during thunderstorms, looked at him like a stranger. No worse, like an intruder, and he couldn't look away. Hey, Katie, he offered weakly, the nickname slipping from his mouth before he could stop it. The moment she flinched, his chest caved in. She didn't speak right away, and the silence was agony. Her posture, slouched and sleepy just moments ago, straightened as her eyes focused on him like a hawk's. Cold, sharp, controlled. In that instant, he realized he was no longer the strong one in the room. Where's Mom? She needed space. She's with your grandmother, he answered, trying to keep his voice calm, knowing full well how futile that was. She nodded once, just once, and in that nod was everything, confirmation, resignation, and the faintest hint of disgust. Then the real question, Sarah. His breath caught in his throat. He felt the back of his neck flush with heat. He looked down at the floor, then up at her again, trying to find a version of the truth that wouldn't sound like cowardice. Yeah, he said, quiet, defeated. Kate's jaw clenched so tight he thought her teeth might crack. Her phone trembled slightly in her grip. She was my best friend, she said, her voice steady, but with a quiver beneath the surface like a taut violin string. Richard wanted to explain, to reach for something, anything that could sound like sense. I was lonely. I lost my way. It meant nothing. It meant everything. I didn't plan it. But the words collapsed before they reached his mouth. All he could see was his daughter's eyes. So much of Laura in them. so much more strength than he had. I never meant to hurt you, he managed. Kate let out a breath, but it wasn't relief. It was fury contained. That's always what people say when they hurt someone, she replied. That they didn't mean to. He stepped forward, reaching out with an instinctive, pitiful gesture. Like he could close the distance that way, but she stepped back fast. Don't, she warned. The rejection sliced through him deeper than anything Laura had said. I was stupid, he tried again. I wasn't thinking. He stopped, shook his head, and finally told the truth. I was weak. Kate's eyes shimmered with tears, but none of them fell. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I looked up to you. You were the one person I trusted not to be like other dads. And then I saw the messages, the photos, the jokes. You were bragging to her like a teenager. The shame hit like a hammer. He felt his breath catch and forced himself not to look away. And now, she continued, more brittle by the second, everyone at school knows. Everyone. Richard blinked. What are you talking about? Screenshots, Dad. Her voice cracked now, but she held herself upright. Someone leaked them. I don't know who, maybe Sarah, maybe someone she sent them to. Doesn't matter. It's out. It's everywhere. He felt the floor give beneath him. Not literally, but it might as well have. Jesus, he muttered. Kate shook her head. Do you know what it's like to walk into school and have people whisper about your family? To have girls call me a slut by association? To see people laughing when I walk by? I didn't know, Richard said, and he meant it. He hadn't even considered what would happen if it became public. His own mess had been confined to the shadows until now. Kate didn't wait for more. She turned and walked away. Her shoulders didn't slump. She didn't collapse. She held herself straight and tall as she disappeared upstairs. Richard was left standing there, gutted. Hours later, the knock came. He opened the door and there was Sarah. No makeup, pale, eyes wide and bloodshot, like she hadn't slept either. She looked smaller, shrunken into herself. Not seductive, not in control, just scared. We need to talk, she said quickly. I'm outside. He stepped out onto the porch, shutting the door firmly behind him, not wanting Kate to hear a single word. You shouldn't have come here, he said. Not now. I know, she said, and her voice cracked, barely a whisper. I didn't know where else to go. Richard stayed quiet. Everyone knows, Sarah continued, her voice rising into panic. Someone shared the screenshots, texts, that photo of us. It's everywhere. Group chats, TikTok. My name's trending in a private parent group. My mom found out. She screamed at me, called me disgusting, said I was no daughter of hers. She rubbed her forearms like she was cold, though the wind wasn't blowing. She said she might go to the school board, the police. She says she wants you arrested. Richard flinched. They won't arrest me. You were over 18. They don't care, Sarah hissed. You're a teacher's husband. I'm a student. It looks bad, Richard. It is bad. I'm being called a homewrecker, predator. Her voice faltered. I'm scared. Her mascara had run slightly. She looked like a kid, not the confident young woman who had leaned into his arms in the church parking lot weeks ago. And for a moment, just a heartbeat, he wanted to run, to tell her to get in the car, to leave this place, start over. He pictured them driving away to another state, somewhere warm, somewhere anonymous. Maybe they could disappear. But then he thought of Kate's face, Laura's voice, Father Mark's warning. He stared at Sarah, and suddenly, he felt something shift. The attraction, whatever had existed, was gone. She was trembling now, eyes wide, lips parted, desperate. And it wasn't love. It was wreckage. You should go, he said more gently than before. This isn't fixable. Sarah stepped back like he'd slapped her. You're just going to let them destroy me? She whispered. You said you cared. I did care, he said. But caring doesn't mean we were right. Sarah looked at him, and for a moment, something in her eyes hardened. You used me, she said, her voice low and venomous now. You let me fall in love with you and then dropped me when it got inconvenient. Richard didn't argue, because she was right. She turned and walked away without another word. From the upstairs window, Kate watched it all unfold. The distance between them, the look on her father's face, the panic on Sarah's. She watched the way Sarah's shoulders curled inward as she walked away, head down. The way Richard didn't move for several seconds after the girl had gone. Kate stood in the dark behind the curtain, fists clenched, nails digging into her palms. She wanted to scream. She wanted to burn the entire house down. She wanted to disappear. But most of all, she wanted it all to not be real. Instead, she turned away from the window and sat on her bed, staring at her phone. Her thumb hovered over the screen. A blank message draft. Her mind swirled with thoughts. To the principal? The school board? The local news? Some part of her wanted to protect her mother's dignity. Another part wanted vengeance. She didn't know what she'd do next. But whatever came, it would not be silence. The emergency meeting at the school was scheduled less than 48 hours after the leak. The parking lot was full before the sun had even dipped below the horizon, lined with SUVs and sedans idling nervously as parents filed into the auditorium. The air was electric, buzzing with whispered speculation, sideways glances, and the low hum of outrage disguised as concern. The screenshots, texts, suggestive messages, the blurred photo of Richard and Sarah in the cabin, had gone viral in the community. Not just among students, but among teachers, parents, and the local PTA Facebook group, where condemnation came fast and loud. The story had already reached a small regional news site. The headline used the word inappropriate, but the comments called it what it was: predatory, disgusting, a betrayal. Richard wasn't invited to the meeting, but he came anyway. He sat in the back row, collar turned up, hat pulled low, eyes hollow. No one spoke to him. He wasn't sure anyone even recognized him anymore. Or perhaps they did and simply didn't want to. At the front of the room, Principal Dalton looked exhausted, his fingers tight around the edge of the podium. He made a strained attempt at professionalism, referring to the matter as a developing situation involving a former student and a member of our school community. But the crowd wasn't there for careful language. They wanted answers, consequences, blood maybe. Richard kept his eyes down until a familiar voice broke through the noise. "Excuse me." All heads turned. Kate stood near the center aisle, her shoulders square, chin lifted. She wore a dark blue hoodie, jeans, her hair tied back in a loose braid. There was no trembling, no fear, only cold, sharp precision. "I'd like to say something," she said. There was hesitation. The silence stretched. Then Principal Dalton nodded. Kate walked to the front of the auditorium. She didn't use the microphone. "My name is Kate Gray. Some of you know me. Most of you probably know what's been said about my family." Her eyes scanned the room, lingering briefly on familiar faces. "You've all seen the screenshots, the rumors. Maybe you think you know what happened. But you don't." Richard's pulse quickened. He could barely breathe. "My best friend slept with my father," Kate said flatly. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. She didn't flinch. He was the adult. She was a teenager. He was supposed to know better. No one interrupted. "I'm not here to defend him. I'm not here to protect her. I'm not here to protect anyone." Her voice rose just slightly. "But I'm tired of watching grown adults gossip like high schoolers while students, kids, are getting bullied for things they didn't do. I've had girls call me a slut. People ask if I knew it was happening, if I let it happen." She looked directly at a group of mothers near the front row. "I didn't. And no, I don't forgive either of them. But this isn't just a scandal. It's a wound. And you can't fix a wound by picking at it over and over." Silence followed her words, heavy and stunned. Even the angriest faces now bore traces of something else: shame, empathy, guilt. Kate turned and walked back down the aisle. As she passed Richard, she didn't look at him. Not once. Richard didn't go home after the meeting. He drove aimlessly for hours, down streets he hadn't been on in years, past the coffee shop where he and Laura used to go on Sunday mornings. past the small lake where they'd taken Kate for paddle boat rides. Every turn brought another ghost. When he finally returned to the house, it was nearly midnight. The porch light was off. The living room was dark. There was a note on the kitchen table. "Richard, we're staying with Mom for now. I need space. Kate needs time. You need help. Don't contact us. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Laura." There was nothing cruel in the note. No threats. No dramatic final lines. Just truth. Just distance. Just silence. Weeks passed. Richard sat in a folding chair in a support group in the basement of a church 2 towns over. There were 8 other men in the circle. Some talked. Some cried. Some just listened. He hadn't spoken much, not yet. But he came. Every Thursday. He'd been served papers. Laura had filed for legal separation. Not divorce, not yet. The line felt both merciful and devastating. He hadn't seen Sarah again. Her mother had withdrawn her from the school. The last he'd heard, they'd moved in with family in Ohio. The real estate company let him go. Quietly. No headlines. Just a mutual parting. He suspected his former partner had known for a while. He didn't fight it. The house was up for sale. Each room echoed now, hollow, haunted. The bed where he and Laura had once talked about retirement. The bathroom where Kate had learned to braid her hair. The hall closet filled with winter coats that still smelled like all 3 of them. He packed in silence. One night, as he boxed up the last of Kate's childhood books, he found a drawing tucked between the pages. It was from years ago, crayon, uneven lines. A smiling stick figure family holding hands beneath a big yellow sun. "Daddy," it said in messy pink letters. "I love you more than the sky." He stared at it for a long time. Then he folded it gently and placed it in the top drawer of his suitcase. Kate didn't go back to her old school. Laura enrolled her in a private arts academy across town. Fresh start, new faces. Kate barely protested. Her grades held. She didn't talk much, but she painted. Often. Violently sometimes. Color bled across canvases in harsh lines and brilliant swirls. Her teachers said she was gifted. She never spoke of Sarah. She rarely mentioned her father. One evening, Laura found her on the back porch, sitting quietly, headphones in, sketchbook open. "Thinking about college?" Laura asked gently. Kate nodded. "Far away." Kate gave a faint, tired smile. "Far enough." Richard wrote a letter. He didn't send it, but he wrote it. "Kate, there are things I could try to explain, but maybe what you need most is not another explanation. Just the truth. I was broken. I chose wrong. And I lost the right to be your hero the moment I stopped being your father. You don't owe me anything. Not forgiveness. Not understanding. But I'll never stop hoping you find peace, even if it's far from me. Dad." He folded the letter, placed it in a drawer. Maybe one day, maybe never. In the end, there were no police charges. No lawsuits, just broken relationships, fractured lives, and long, empty silences. The kind of silence that echoes louder than anger. In time, people stopped whispering. New scandals took over. New gossip. But for the Grays, the scar remained. Invisible. Permanent. A reminder of what happens when desire becomes blindness. When silence becomes complicity. And when truth comes too late. Some stories don't end with forgiveness. Some just end. And leave you to carry the weight.